See, it still baffles me that in 2019, I still have to have certain conversations. I was chilling at the park a couple of weeks ago with some friends of mine, and I happened to mention that I was from Kenya. And one Spanish guy that I just met the same day goes, "Oh, that's so crazy. I know a guy called Mohammed from Egypt." Strange. But see, I've had that one too many times, so I swiftly replied, "Oh, that's so crazy too. I know a guy called Mikael from Finland." And I could slowly see how confused and perplexed he was at the idea that I would know one single Mikael from Finland and how he would know how would I would know one Mohammed from Egypt. But see, the reason for such perceptions and such narratives is because the media in Europe does this to us. It portrays Africa as poverty-stricken and constantly in need of aid. Take this image, for example. See, I took this picture not too long ago in a mall here in Berlin. It has the title, "Willkommen in Kenya, entdecke Irene's Welt." In English, "Welcome to Kenya, discover Irene's world." But see, this picture does not depict my country. It does not depict where I'm from. In my opinion, it's yet another attempt to paint my country, in a larger sense my continent, with the same brush and narrative that has gone on for years on end. I wonder how it would come across if I took a picture of a homeless man here in Berlin and caption it, "Welcome to Germany, discover Otto's world." Would that be a fair assumption of what living in Germany is like? I believe not. So I hope a day will come where one does not have to reiterate the simple fact that Africa is indeed a continent and not a country, has over 1.2 billion people and over 50 different countries. In fact, Kaya Krause made this image that just showcased how many countries can fit inside Africa. So we have the US, China, Germany, India, you name it. It's crazy. Last year, the blockbuster movie Black Panther came out that depicted yet a different Africa, a futuristic Africa. It showcases a country called Wakanda in the sub-Saharan region. Wakanda showed women in technology, women in leadership. See, Wakanda also had people using their own mineral resources for their own economic progress. But see, the difference between Wakanda and many other African countries is the simple fact that Wakanda was never colonized. As Lupita Nyong'o, one of the actors of the film, rightly puts it, Wakanda is a reimagining of what Africa could have been had it been allowed to define itself for itself. But see, despite our colonial past, Africa is still on the rise. We have a country like Rwanda, which is safer, cleaner, and more innovative than many European countries. A country like Nigeria, which is currently thriving in technology. A country like Ethiopia, that recently elected its first female president. So when I think about my country and my city, Nairobi, I think about this beautiful skyline. And I think about this. A city bustling with hardworking, always hustling Kenyans. That despite the hard days, we still forge on because that is the true spirit of Pan-Africanism. Now that that's out of the way, this Agenda 2063 and the Africa we want. In essence, as you've been told, it's a framework that aims at the socio-economic development of the continent for the next 50 years. So this agenda is also very closely linked to the International Africa Day, a day that I must say challenged my life and how I saw myself as an African and a true Pan-African, and this is why.
I could feel it coming. I didn't know what I built to last. I know you think you could do too. I know you think you feel it's true. It's a little things in life that I feel.
The 25th of May, the International Africa Day, is a day that I was only made aware of nearly 3 years ago. A few African students at my university, shout out to Ryan Valley University of Applied Sciences, came together to organize an event that aspired to celebrate the continent of Africa. But see, as a Kenyan who's lived most of his life in Kenya, I never really identified with the whole continent as a whole. So the idea that my Africanness or my Kenyanness needed to be celebrated was unheard of to me. And as we've just seen on this day, Africans came out in their numbers. From the different musical performances, the different outfits, the different food and cuisine, Africans were loud, Africans were present, Africans were proud. And it's a joy that cannot be put into words, and it's something that I look forward to in the next International Africa Day on the 25th of May this year. That's actually next Saturday. I did not know that this day held so much more importance because on the 25th of May in 2013, African leaders came together at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to celebrate three things: Pan-Africanism, unity, and Renaissance. See, as much as Africa had a lot to be proud of, African leaders used this platform to take stock of what still needed to be achieved. Heads of state then decided that in the next 50 years, they wanted a different Africa. See, by the year 2063, Africa will be nearly 30% of the world population. And if you're going to be that sizable, then we would likewise need a sizable economic presence. But before I even delve in to really discuss about this Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, I'd like to first tell you about the Africa that I want. Growing up in a middle-class Kenyan household, my parents worked really hard and made it very possible for my brothers and I to live a life that many other Kenyans would only have aspired. We'd so often be sitting in traffic, and women with young kids as young as 3 years old would come knocking on the window begging for money, and I always wondered, why was the disparity between the rich and the poor so large? Why did we have Kenyans living in 3-story mansions, but yet their house helps live in a slum down the road? So from a very young age, the Africa that I always wanted was an Africa that was rid of poverty. Idealistic, some may say. An Africa that did not have clear walls that demarcated the rich and the poor neighborhoods. An Africa that did not rejoice in the rich get richer and the poor get poorer mentality, but an Africa that sought to find solutions to bridge this gap. I also went on to experience both a Kenyan and an international education. Granted, the Kenyan school I attended was not a public Kenyan school that definitely saw more harsh conditions. My experience at the German school in Nairobi that I attended spoke volumes. See, from simple things like the food we ate, the books we read, to the different sports and the travel opportunities we were exposed to, I realized that my privilege should not have been a privilege, but a human right. I realized that every child should have the opportunity to have a quality education supported by quality teaching staff, equipped libraries, and top-notch technologies to keep up with the times. But sadly, this is not the case, and not every child gets to experience a quality education. Now, due to my privileged education, I then went on to study abroad, thereby creating an even larger gap between my peers back in Kenya and I. I got to travel the world, attend different conferences, top-notch seminars, thereby equipping myself with life skills I believe would not have been exposed to had I been back at home. So the Africa that I also want is an Africa where African youth are empowered with information about global gatherings, global get-togethers such as this, where like-minded young future leaders can come together to tackle head-on global problems. See, former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan once said, "Knowledge is power, information is liberating, and education is the premise of all progress." Now, at school back in Kenya, I was taught from a very young age not to really embrace my national language, Swahili, but to practice speaking English more. See, this was done in order to prepare me for the real world, to make me fit in, but in actuality, we were actually born to stand out. So here I was. I left Kenya going into Germany to pursue my undergraduate studies. And what struck me was the first people I moved in with were Egyptians, and they so comfortably spoke Arabic amongst each other. I then went on to make some friends from West Africa, and the same thing happened again. I made a friend from Kenya from the coastal region who spoke perfect Swahili. And so she challenged me and asked me, why can't you speak perfect Swahili? So here I was, in the real world, And this language that I was so uninterested to learn was the one thing that set me apart from everybody else. Fast forward 4 years later, I would like to say that I speak perfect Swahili, but start to say that this reality and this realization came to me once I left my home country. So the Africa that I also want is an Africa where we celebrate Pan-Africanism. As idealistic as this word may seem, it simply means a unified Africa. An Africa that is not afraid to be different. An Africa that solely plans on standing out. An Africa that embraces its uniqueness in its food, its fashion, its culture, and lastly, its languages. Basically, an unapologetic Africa. Because truth be said, we Africans, we are limited edition, and we are born to be different. Now, to draw back on what Agenda 2063 actually aspires for our continent. See, the goals of this Agenda 2063 will be driven by us, its citizens, and attained through 12 continental flagship projects. And this transformation will be guided by 3 African Union visions, which is an integrated, a prosperous, and a peaceful Africa. So the implementation of this very big, ambitious plan will be led by the African Union at the continental level, by the regional economic communities at the regional level, and lastly by us, the citizenry, at the national level. One of the flagship projects of this Agenda 2063 that maybe some of you have heard of is the African Passport, that basically would remove restrictions and allow Africans to travel, live, and work within the continent. We also have this African Continental Free Trade Area that recently reached the minimum number of ratifications necessary to come to effect. And this, in essence, would accelerate intra-African trade and boost Africa's position in the trading world. There's also this African high-speed train network that aims to allow travel for Africans throughout the whole continent. So just imagining Jesse going from Kinshasa in the Congo to Nairobi in Kenya. Wouldn't that be something? But I believe to achieve all these things, we cannot forget the words of Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister and President of Ghana, when he said, Africa must unite now. Africa must neither look east or west, Africa must look forward. And see, several of these projects are being run by the Chinese government under this Belt and Roadship Initiative that basically is a developmental project that is China helping out over 152 different countries. And I've also come from Kenya literally 3 weeks ago. And the most skeptical side of me would say that the Chinese are coming to our country, taking over, bringing in their own labor, pretending to strengthen our economy, but in actuality strengthening their own. But the more gullible, utopic side of me would say that I have faith in my current government and the plans it has for my country. So the question I must ask myself, as a young, capable African here in the diaspora, is my generation truly capable of moving my mother continent forward? Do I possess the skills and the know-how required to bring this socio-economic development? Or will this Agenda 2063 be yet another unfulfilled dream swept under the rug to create a new Agenda 2093? One of the famous professors of my country, who's called Professor PLO Lumumba, once said, it could very well be that in 100 years' time, if you ask the young Africans if they want to be colonized, they will say, yes, colonize us. And see, this sent chills down my spine because the sad reality is, sometimes I think Africans speak on the biggest platforms, the biggest roundtable discussions, but I think until I choose as an African to change my mindset, then all this talk and progress will be left at the table. The sad reality is when we are called to elect our leaders, we elect them based on tribal lines and ethnic groups, and I wonder, will this type of thinking bring any continental development if that is a dominant instinct that leads us? See, my friends, Agenda 2063 is not only a challenge to us, but a wake-up call that if Africa is to truly fulfill its potential, then we, the youth, must free ourselves from the chains of mental enslavement and dependency. I must choose to see myself as equal to all my European counterparts present in this room today and claim my rightful place at the table. The choice is mine, the choice is yours, the choice is simply ours. 67. That's the age I'll be by the year 2063. And the founders of this agenda will be long gone, and I can only hope that my continent continues thriving forward and bringing more and more continental development for itself. I will leave you the words of famous photographer, potentially controversial activist Boniface Mwangi. And he says, there are two powerful days in your life: the day you were born and the day you discover why. And I've made a personal commitment to myself to make the realization of Agenda 2063 amongst my why. So I implore you, as young, capable citizens of the world, wherever you may be, whatever position you may be, to not only talk about it, but be about it. In whatever capacity, please be an active agent of change. Thank you.